My name is Beth Herschman. I'm a member of the Zero Garden Club. I'm a founder member. And I have been one of the presidents of the council. And I'm now first vice president of the council. So, and I'm a past master gardener. So, welcome all you master gardeners. It's good to see you again. Let me see if I can get this thing going. I think we need some lights on. Or it will be a little bit difficult. When I did my studies on garden design, I was living on the East Coast, and I got the degree from George Washington University. And when I moved out here, I wasn't sure that there was even any need for garden design. Well, I was surprised. Because you need it here worse than you need it anywhere. If you don't design your garden and plan your watering systems and understand what plants you're going to plant where, you're in a heap of trouble. So I'm going to talk to you about the basic principles of garden design, and I'm also going to throw in the principles of zero gardening. So here we go. Let's see, I think that does it. Okay. This is a basic rule for anybody. Measure everything. Start with a couple of big long tapes and find yourself a 0 point on one corner of your garden and plot it out like you would on you're going to end up with a piece of paper, a grid system, and put things on there. The thing that you really need to note is where the windows and doors in your house are, where the water is, where your water system is going to be located, and where the street is, where the sidewalk is, so that anybody who's passing by or whatever, you'll know that there's this much space between them and whatever you're going to plant there. Make sure you put any kind of plant that you're going to keep on your grid system. You don't have to put anything you're going to get rid of. So that's the easy part. Okay, so once you've done that, that's rule number one. Rule number two is to find all the things that you want to incorporate into your garden. And we all have different needs, but make a list. Start with a list. And then try to see if on your piece of paper you can find just a general area that you could put those things in and have them all kind of work together. One of the most interesting things I've seen lately is pet spaces, where people have been, everybody's worried about the hogs coming in and taking their little puppy. I've seen some cat cages that went kind of all over the garden, that they're covered over the top, and some dog runs the same way. They're like really long tunnels made out of wire, wire fencing. And that keeps them all safe. So if you're going to have animals in your yard, you might want to think about one of those things first. Water features, you have to have water, you usually have to have electricity, so plan for that. And water features are important in New Mexico. When I first came here, I thought, oh, nobody will have water features, and I found out that everybody has water features. It's necessary. It's necessary for the critters that live in your yard, and you want critters there. So, okay, number three. I'm going to spend a little time on this. Pick a style, and even if you think you're just doing deerscape, that doesn't matter. You still need to have a style. And if you have an English garden style, which is probably the easiest to do, you just have to have a hard edge somewhere that controls all the stuff you've got in the middle of it. So, like this is controlled by the driveway edge. And this is here in Albuquerque. It's a bunch of basically spring flowers that grow from seed that are not too hard to grow here. Obviously, with that many plants, you need a little more water. So, one of the principles of xeriscaping is to put the most water use nearest to your house. But I've changed that a little bit because I feel like you put it where you're going to be the most. So if you happen to spend all your time in a back patio that's like way out in the back corner, that's where you want your most water use, so that you have all the nice small, happy things growing there. But generally, it's where you're going to be the most, is where you put the most water, and the further out from that you go, you have zones. Here's another example of the English garden. See, she's got, I don't know if I can actually point this. Does anybody see anything?
Yeah.
Where is it? No, I don't see it.
Sorry, there it is. You're way off to this side, to the right.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, down here she's got a hard edge. And that's what keeps it looking neat and keeps it from being a mess. Okay. The Asian style actually works very well here. You don't use as many plants. You do use a lot of gravel, some nice rocks that are decorative. The main thing you do is you put in evergreens and you trim them within an inch of their life. That's pretty much it. Now, this has a lot of water in it, but this doesn't, and it has kind of the same effect. This is at the Botanic Garden, and if you haven't been there and haven't seen the Japanese garden there, it's kind of worth taking a really good hard look at. They have used some substitute plants that are not the Asian normal plants that they plant, and they've used some things kind of from Mexico that take the same shape or color that they want, and those plants work here in our environment, in a drier climate. You can also do something at a very small scale. This is not particularly good, but you can see that you can do something on a very small scale if you wanted to. Back quite some time ago, probably 30 or 40 years ago, maybe longer, there were a group of Japanese nurserymen, the nursery families that lived here. And they really are responsible, I think, for the combination of evergreens and rocks and gravel that you see so often in the old front yards that have been here for forever. And I think that's not a bad thing if it's nicely done. I don't really like to just see this pile of gravel and a tree stuck in the middle of it, but they have done some pretty nice things, and it could be adopted here nicely. The style that we probably ought to be doing more of is this Spanish style, which actually comes from Arabia. And it goes as far back, I suspect, as far back as the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, but I can't prove that. But it's a very old concept, and it's this, wrong button, sorry. It's this four square concept. So you have an axis here and an axis there, and this can be multiplied over and over and over again, and then it can be shaped into something more like this, with a focal point here. It's often a water feature, and this has been adopted basically worldwide. It's gone as far as India, and it's come back to all of the European countries, and a lot, you see it a lot on the East Coast, you don't see it much out here, but you do see remnants of that in the Spanish style stuff that we have. So this is what not to do here, but it's really pretty, and it does follow that design. This is another version of this. This could even be adapted for, you could, rather than the, look at this thing going again. Rather than these types of things along the edge, you could just have boards or something. This is basically a circle or semicircle. And then this is the side axis, and this is the long axis. And then these are kind of pie-shaped beds in here. I think they're growing, looks like some, maybe tomatoes in here, you know, other vegetables and things of that nature. So this is one way to kind of control what you're doing and keep it in one place. And it's easy to handle the water when you have it, you know, all together like that. This is here in Albuquerque. They do use a lot of water for this. But it's a really nice, pretty little thing to look at. They have roses in the middle. Roses are very xeric, by the way. You will find that they do really well here. When I first came here, I hated roses because in the East they're always sick. They've got black spot and the leaves are falling off, you know, and they look horrible. And when I got here, I happened to park one day over by the garden. It's what's the name of that? The Tony Holland library. And I was just stunned because they all were just so big and so healthy. And I thought, wow, roses really like it here. So you can really use roses, and there's a lot of rose family members that are not only xeric, but they are native. And I mean, there are just so many of them, I can't even name them all, but you will find that there are ways to use those. This is another version of that. This is Bouchard Gardens in Vancouver. So, you know, we can't really do this, but it's the style of garden that I'm showing you. No, wrong way. This is what's in the middle of that garden. So it's a big water garden in the center of it, but usually it's a pathway rather than a water structure. However, this is the Alhambra in Spain, and in Spain they also didn't have a lot of water. And they used sunken gardens. I don't know if you can really tell that, but
Repeat, what would you call it, a guard? Some kind of a guard?
sunken.
Sunken.
Yeah, they sunk these gardens down, and we kind of do that here too, because where in the East you would plant your trees and shrubs up kind of on a mound, so the water would drain off. Here we plant them in a low spot. We pick a spot and put it in a low spot so the water drains into there, and that's what they were doing here at the Alhambra. And instead of the long pathway, they have used water. And in such a dry environment, that water must have just made you feel like you were in heaven. So this is the long axis. And there's some cross axes in various places. There's one down here and one up there and one across the top. But here's a same version of that in Old Town. You have this long axis, that goes this way. There's actually one behind where the picture is that goes crossways. And you have the shrubs on the side, and you have this little round thing with a bird bath, a little focal point, and an arch beyond it. So this is all very much the Spanish style. And we use these without even knowing we're using them. We use arches, we use pathways. So
If you,
just be aware of what you're doing. Someone had a question.
if you don't have water, but you have like a fountain, you can make a fountain with that gaillardia plant if you plant it really close together, and it comes up and it will kind of cascade up and over, so it looks like you've got this spray of water coming up, and that's real xerix egg. And then you can plant something, inside, and then higher.
So you're saying plant in like a water feature?
So that it actually looks like a water feature. It doesn't even have to have
Doesn't have to
a
be.
fountain in there. You plant it in the round and close together, and it creates the look of happiness.
Yeah. And that was a point that I kind of didn't make very well, which is it doesn't in the middle of these things. It doesn't have to be a water feature at all. It can just be a focal point, and that's what you're talking about. It would be a focal point. It might look like a water or a three-tiered or something, but anything can be a focal point. Sometimes it's just an interesting tree, or something. This is overkill, but you get the understanding here of how many ways you can use this concept. You can make it really simple, or you can go use it over and over and over again repetitively. Okay, so enough about this. Another style is very modern and contemporary. This is a very xeric yard. I will tell you the maintenance of it is a nightmare. But it's beautiful. It has many different plants that are used in masses and in lines, rows and lines, and it's really something. But the problem is, if one of your plants dies, all that symmetry and those rows kind of get messed up. For instance, back here, you'll see this smaller plant that had to be replanted because something died. And this guy really had a beautiful place. I was going to tell you that in modern or contemporary gardens, you tend to have a lot of hard, straight lines. You reuse masses of plants and not a lot of variety, but you can kind of see what we're talking about here. And your pathways are straight and, more or less. Here's another very modern design on it. It's circular. This is from, this is the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. And underneath all this concrete and stuff, this is built on a really steep hillside. Underneath is parking garages, but up above here, and the vantage points that you have are really high up, looking down on these gardens. So this is again masses of the same thing, following lines. You can do something really simple like this in your own gardens. You have to think it through, plan it. And then there's the English park style, which is really hard for us to achieve here, but we do occasionally. Capability Brown was the name of the person who started this in England, I think in the 1800s, sometime, I forgot when. But here's an example of that right here in Albuquerque. This is in the North Valley, where they have irrigation ditches, and they have access to a lot of water, so this is what they can do. It's not very Zurich, but it's nice to have. Excuse me. If you don't know what to do with a space, you can make it a separate garden room. And it can be different. It can be, paving and chairs, or it can be a room for your cactus collection, whatever. One of the ways to get from one area to another is just to simply, draw a line basically and put an arch or something to let you get through to the next side. I wanted to show you how nature kind of takes these two trees and entangles them. You can do that yourself. You can put a couple of trees in the ground, and when they get high enough, you can start training an arch into them, tie them together, and then in some places I've seen those purple plums bleached. That's what they call it when they cut them into a shape, and it's just. I've seen one that looks like the Arctic curl. So, you can have fun with your garden too. This is overkill for here, but it's a beautiful arch with a lot of a really good vine across it, and probably looks like Florida or someplace. This arch is in my garden. It's got the trumpet vine all over it. I hate it. This year it's coming out because it's been popping up all over the rest of the garden. It is a nuisance, but it's a pretty plant. I don't know if you have the tolerance for it, but I don't.
Is it invasive?
It's very invasive, and it not only invades your yard, it invades your neighbors. So that's going to come out. But the birds enjoyed it while it was there. This little, sometimes the garden room is actually a room. So this shaded area over here, this woman has a huge number of succulents, basically, mostly succulents. And most of them go under this shaded area in the summertime. It's just filled with them. So you may have to have a space for your favorite hobby, whatever that is, orchids or whatever. This is in the same yard in a different room. And so she has this open space and a little shelter there. So the thing you want to do is make a plan. And you can do a lot with a plan. You can put it on, I don't know if you can see behind this, but there's a grid that's on an angle. So you can make these lines kind of line up with the angles, and it makes life more interesting. Or you can have a round one. Push the wrong button. You can have a round one, or just figure out what you want. I find that the most useful thing I do is plan the circulation first, where the paths are going to go. Because if you have a path that doesn't connect to where you need to get to, or you have a gate that's too small to get heavy equipment in if you need heavy equipment, or the path is too narrow to take your wheelbarrow, you really need to plan your paths first. And a minimum space for a path to me is about 3 feet wide with a little extra space on either side. 4 feet's best. But when we set up the garden here, we planned the space. We planned all of the sidewalks and patios first, and then the beds just kind of fell naturally into those spaces. So this is our garden. garden, looking back toward the building. I'm not sure when that was because I don't see the J-Road garden yet. Maybe it's there. Anyway, your paths can be jagged, zigzag, they can be curved, they can be straight, and a lot of that depends on what your design is. I find curved lines are really useful here because we have so many very small spaces. A lot of people have a very small backyard, and this is one of them. I don't know if you can actually tell, but back in the back corner there, you come around the back side of the house, and there's a tiny little patio there, just big enough for 2 chairs, and then this pathway does this. And the only reason they have room enough to plant a tree here and a tree here and a big shrub back there is because they have done this. They have made this come this way so they can plant a shrub there. They've made it come this way so they can plant trees and shrubs here. And they've made it come back this way so they can plant a tree in here. And if you had cut this right straight down the middle, you'd have had room for none of those. So you have to think about the spaces you're dealing with. Japanese style is really different with regard to pathways. They purposely make them kind of offsetting and off-putting. So the point of that is they want you to slow down and to stop, pause, look around, make sure you see everything before you take the next step forward. So we do have several Japanese gardens in Japanese style gardens or Zen gardens of one sort or another in New Mexico. It seems to fit here pretty well. But if you're trying to stage them so that you have, a long period, you can buy like daffodils and that will grow some now, some later. You could do that. Or you can just buy one variety that comes up when you want it to, and it's done. You can also do the same thing with tulips. As I said, I only buy the Darwin hybrids, and they're usually tall, they're usually one solid color, and they do the job. They're kind of a mid spring bloomer. And then I find that in the late spring things, it's too late here because we get too much wind, it's too hot, and they just kind of get blasted. So I stick to the early and the mid.
Another question, please.
Yeah.
For the height of tulips, is that dependent on how much water they get?
No, they have a stated height, and it would be, like 16 to 18 inches or something like that, or 5 to 6 or whatever, And it says it it'll say on the label, or I advise you to either buy them here or buy them from a catalog, because the catalog stuff is going to come to you at the right time, and it's going to be fresh. If you buy them at the stores, they usually last year's, dried up mess. So, yeah.
What were the name of the tulips that come back? What were the others?
Darwin hybrids. P-A-R-W-I-N. Hybrids. And sometimes it's kind of hard to find Darwin. They'll sometimes call them something else, but they will tell you that they are rebloomers or something like that they're a hybrid. And so you have to kind of read through the lines sometimes. Okay, other things that bloom in the spring. This is pine leaf penstemon in front, and the taller bush behind there is the blue bush is catnip. There's several kinds of catnip. There's the grow and there's the taller one. This is the taller one. I happen to like that larger size. the plant full. Uh-huh.
With the cat mint, you know, a lot of times mints, they just go crazy.
They do. Not all.
Is that one of them?
Some people tell me they have a lot of trouble with catnip. I can't get it to spread. I'd like to have more of it.
Mine does, but I then use it other places. But the honeybees is one of the first flowers up in the mountains that bloom.
Yeah.
And it's already starting to bloom right now, so that's good. But the honeybees really love it.
Yeah. Please. Try to get as many flowering plants as you can in your yard, and the ones that will stay a while, but the bees like. That's why I grow lavender and the catmint, and I mean, I just keep trying to put more and more things in there. Okay, this is in here because this is in April. This is during the plant sale. We happened to rain that day, and I thought, this is such a pretty picture with the wet sidewalk. So I just wanted to tell you, if you're going to take a good picture of your yard or your garden, spray down the sidewalks. It'll look really good. But there, in bloom here is already, this early spring is this the kind of very standard iris. There's something over here, I'm not sure what that is. It's some kind of ground cover. And the other thing that's always in bloom at this time is soapwort, which is a native plant. It only blooms once, but it's spectacular when it does bloom, and it's a nice little ground cover. Okay, I think summer is the hardest time to grow stuff here. But you can buy all kinds of annuals and plant them in places and in pots and keep things going. This is the garden center again. That's our poppies and Centranthus rubra. This is the Centranthus, poppies, yarrow, and this is lavender, which hasn't quite, it's just about to go. The lavenders are gone now, they're pulling out. The roses are really good up till about, I don't know, mid-June or something. And then they kind of fade away and then come back in the later time. I really like my blooming cactus. When the cactus blooms, they are absolutely swarmed with all kinds of bugs. There might be 20 tiny little bugs on the cactus blooms. So I think they're really worth keeping, worth nurturing, because these are native plants that all of our little bugs have gotten used to, and this is how they survive. We need the cactus. And people who say, well, they know on cactus, I'll tell you, they're not hard to take care of. Get us a prong, a thing, what do you call this thing?
Tom.
A tongs, thank you. And just, clean them out in between,
If you go for the barbecue tongs,
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
and also the guy that does my heavy yard work said 9-inch pliers, where you've got a really long pulling part, and you don't have to
Right.
scratch down.
And I prune them because I have a very small space that I've got this giant cactus in. And so I have to prune off about at least 4 or 5 pads every year. You can prune those. I mean, I have a long handle pruner, clippers. And I just slice through them and grab them with the, just set them off out of the way. That's the easiest thing to do with a really giant cactus. But it really serves a purpose in the garden. I have a lot of other cacti too, but this is my favorite. And bugs and things. So please try not to get something that's too much of a hybrid. On the other hand, I really like the chitolpa, which doesn't feed anything or anybody, but it's a really great small shade tree. It has a reputation for having a virus that's everywhere, And I have to tell you, I've never had a problem with a Chautauqua. So, they may have viruses, but I've never lost one, and they've always provided the shade that I needed where I needed it in a really fast way. A Chautauqua is a cross between the Chalopsis linearis, which is the desert willow, and the Chautauqua, which is this giant tree with the big leaves and the long beans. And this is not, it doesn't bear fruit. It's, what am I trying to say? Somebody tell me.
Do you know how hardy it is, like,
It's just as hardy as the rest of them.
as the Chautauqua?
Yeah.
Because I can grow the Chautauqua, I have that tree, but I'm not sure about the desert willow, if it would work up there.
What are you asking?
If that Chautauqua would grow where your regular Chautauqua that has the beans, if
The
that
Chautauqua.
Chautauqua. Okay.
Probably go to the same place. They have all of these, they have both trees growing here. They don't tend to use, or I don't know quite what they do with the Chautauquas here, but for some reason they top them, or else they've got a hybrid that doesn't grow straight up, doesn't grow and get really tall. It's kind of like an umbrella tree. A lot of people call it an umbrella tree, and I don't know why.
Where do you find that?
The Chautauqua, you'll find it at the nurseries.
Okay.
They will have them. Like I said, it's not a recommended one. It's not recommended really by the master gardeners because of this virus that it has, or that many of them have. But like I said, I've not had a problem. I've had it in 3 different places. So, the reason I like it is because it has a bigger leaf than the desert willow. So if you need something with a little more shade but is not overwhelming, this is a good tree for that. They don't have a long life. None of these do. Okay, it's time to go. So I'm going to just tell you that you really have to have a watering system. Plan it. You have to plant it at the same time you're planting your garden and what you're planting. Try to do at least one section at a time so that you know that everything in that, what the water needs and everything in that section of your garden is. And, work on it that way. Somebody? And finally, don't forget to add a little whimsy. Somebody had too much fine china. So they used it out here. This is Teresa's yard. These people had a lot of money, so they have some really big, nice whimsy. This is a little fairy garden that one of my friends put together. Water features are important. We have fish in ours. It's a place that the birds come to. We have a small pond. This is not ours. But ponds really do have a function in a dry environment. And if you are up for that, it's not a bad thing. The water gets recycled. I mean, you have to add water occasionally, but it's no worse than having a farm. You can also have very small little drippy things, or things that are bird baths that constantly bubble. And then the last thing I want to say is to borrow the views that you have in your yard. Don't shut them out, but borrow them. And so if you have a mountain in front of you, put a couple of trees on either side so that you're framing it and enjoy it. And these are the final rules. Make a 5-year plan. Don't plan to do the whole thing all at once. It's very hard. Somebody gave me that piece of advice when I first moved here. It was the best advice I ever got. He said, don't try to do the whole thing at once. You'll not be able to handle it. And so you do something. And then every year you just pick the worst spot and work on it. And that kind of